Now pleased to be joined by an ATP pro. He's a former Wimbledon junior singles champion. He's also founder of Behind the Racquet and a voice on its popular podcast, which gives a glimpse into the ins and outs of the professional tennis life told by its players. Thrilled to be welcomed by Noah Rubin on the podcast. Noah, thanks for joining Matchpoint Canada this week.
No, thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, happy to have you. I should also wish you Chag Sameach because
Oh,
it is Passover and I'm celebrating as well. Have to pick up
oh.
my matzah today actually, so I don't know if you're celebrating yourself.
I actually did this weekend with my family, so a little early, but yeah, no, it was nice to actually spend some time with family. They're mostly vaccinated, so I feel good at this point.
That's great. Well, glad to hear. Before we get into behind the racket and obviously what you founded and kind of created here, I'm just curious to get to know you more in terms of your background as a player. You had so much success as a junior growing up in the States. At what age did you first pick up a racket, and when did you start having those aspirations to maybe become a professional?
There are not many, well, besides my friends, I think I'm arrogant, but there are not many things that I like to brag about besides the first time I remember picking up a racket, which I don't clearly remember. It is my first picture on my camera roll.
Mhm.
And it's me about a year and a half years old, in a diaper with a shirt on, hitting a ball hung from the ceiling that my parents did. So yeah, they like to say I had a racket in my hand since birth. But my first tournament was, yeah, I was 7 years old. So definitely started young.
And from there, like, were you always kind of the like prodigy phenom? Was that the sense when you were a child, I guess?
Um, I think, I can't attest to it at that age, but I think they knew that I had talent. I don't know if they knew what it was until I was around 8 years old, 9 years old, 10 years old when they started putting me in tournaments. Earlier on than that, yeah, I looked at footage of me. I had footage when I was 4, and I was like, oh, I don't know if every 4 year old can hit like that, but you don't really know what that means
Right.
until you're playing. So, it wasn't really until, for me personally, until I was 10, 11, starting to actually move into international tournaments. My first one in Montreal. And I was like, oh, okay, maybe I am competing with some of the best players in the world right now. Maybe this is something larger than just really enjoying it. But for a long period of my life, it was just, let's see if Noah enjoys it. So it's been an interesting ride.
Yeah, no doubt about that. And then fast forward to Wimbledon years later, and you're hoisting a junior singles champion. What are some memories of maybe first stepping on the grounds even at the All England Club, and the feeling you get as like a still a teenage player?
Yeah, it was. What a lot of people don't know is I actually reached my career high ranking when I was 15 in ITF. So after that, I stopped playing ITF. So I focused more on my professional career. Didn't really know if I was going to go to university or not. But at that point, I got to sixth in the world, and I said, I don't know if I need anything else out of juniors right now. I think I got all I could. And then I had a few people from my team, and this actually, funny enough, I never won a match at Wimbledon before prior to this. Never. I
Really?
played it. I played it 2 or 3 times before, and then had no ITF ranking. And my ATP ranking at this point got me into the junior event. They have this kind of rule that if you're top 550 in the world, it's like an exemption. And so I got into qualifying for both French Open and Wimbledon my last year. Qualified for French, lost second round to Quinton Alice, and then qualified for Wimbledon and ended up winning that. So it was incredible. Wimbledon was just for fun. I mean, I think I got there like 12 hours before my first round match, just with my father, and just had a really good time. And I blinked and I was holding a trophy. So it was a incredible week that I had no expectations for.
Yeah, it's funny to listen to that, and you think of trajectories of careers in sports. And I was just listening back to a Behind the Racket podcast of yours, and joking about a quarter life crisis because you recently turned 25. Do you sometimes feel like you're 50 years old, but at the same time, you still have such a long life ahead of you?
Yeah, I don't think. Yeah, I mean, my body feels like it's 90 sometimes after a good, hard court run. So that never helps. But yeah, tennis is one of those sports. It's so difficult in what it demands from you, and and this always goes to the age old question of like, what is success? So, when you see, Alcaraz coming up at 17 years old, or Yannick Sinner at 19, and you have these guys having so much success at such a young age. And, God forbid we had Nadal at his age winning Grand Slams at that age. So, you have that. And then you look at 25 where, I haven't hit top 100 yet, it's been a tough year for everybody involved, a year and a half at this point. So it gets difficult. You almost find yourself irrelevant, and that's when I make jokes about a quarter life crisis. But it's this idea that tennis is always looking for that one person. It's never looking for the 50 people. So it's always looking for that next one person. So, you know, yes, I had the spotlight for 3 months, and then it goes on to the next guy, and then it's a Francis Tiafo who's 2 years younger than me that's now ahead of me, and it happens so quickly. So you take your 15 minutes and you kind of move on. But put the jokes aside, it does get tough. I know a lot of players that have been in my shoes that you know did not even have the same success that I had. So I was very fortunate in my success so far, and I do laugh. I can take the next 4 years off from tennis and still have enough time to make it, quote unquote. But tennis has that irrelevant feeling on and off. So.
Yeah, certainly short-term memory, I think, in terms of how we treat our players. I deal with this sometimes just speaking about Bianca Andreescu here. People will come up to me and be like, what's going on with Bianca? Like, what's next for
The
her? And I
worst.
was like, well, she's a US Open champion. She's won a Grand Slam title. And just having to remind people of that fact. You mentioned you reached number 125 is the career high. We've seen you compete in Grand Slam main draws, seen you battle Roger Federer at the Australian Open. What do you think the level of the game is right now on the ATP side, and how much do you think is separating maybe that top 100 between those who are trying to get there for the first time?
Honestly, I mean, the ranking system that we're in right now, for those that don't know, it's basically almost a 3-year ranking system because we are trying to make it where players don't feel obligated to travel during COVID. But in hindsight, there is really no good answer for it because right now it's nearly impossible to move up the rankings. But if anything, I think it shows just the depth of just talents and playability, between players from 20 in the world to 300 in the world basically, and you're looking at that and you're saying that at any given day that person can win a challenger, that person can get to third round of a Grand Slam, and that just proves how difficult the situation is. And then it shows you can put it on that player is working harder, or maybe there is some luck involved, but the player that's making a living versus the player not making a living, the actual level of tennis is not that much different. So, especially South America is a great example. And hopefully they don't take this personally. But I mean, I think during the pandemic, there's more players that won a challenger that I've never heard of during this time, in any other sport that, would win at that level that you just really never heard of. I mean, young kids coming out, obviously in South America, they're mostly clay court players. And I get that, but still it's incredible to see just the depth. And I think that's just aiding to the fact that there should be more players making a living, and it should boil down a little bit to not be as top heavy, because I get the top 5 players, I get what they make, but somebody 30 in the world compared to somebody 90 or 130, is there that much of a difference? So it gets difficult.
Yeah, certainly. I think a testament to that, and there not being that much of a difference is look at Aslan Karatsev and what he's done this season. Someone who was outside of the top 100 and mainly playing challengers for the bulk of his career, and now he is suddenly inside the top 30 and beating everybody. I wanted to get into Behind the Racket because I find it such a fascinating platform and podcast. And, you capture the human side of players so well, and what we don't really see as fans and media too. For someone like you, you've experienced so many highs in the sport, you've experienced the lows as well. How important was this platform and journey for you to create in terms of maybe kind of liberating yourself a little bit, and also just connecting with other athletes like yourself?
It's actually a good question because I've told people that I've asked it to that extent, and it is therapeutic for me. It was early on, and it still is to this day. I do feel responsibility now to keep it up and running, and to kind of expand it as much as I can, because I do think it is helping people. I get a lot of people that come up and say, whether it's the players saying thank you for helping out or the fans saying it's great, to connect with them. And also I've dealt with that myself and to hear them speaking about it. But, for me, it's I guess ironic in a way, during my darkest periods were actually during my highest level of tennis. So, I started Behind the Racket in January of 2019. It was actually the end of 2018 where I hit my career high ranking. So it was at that point where I hit that, got my top 10 win, playing well at slams. And then I got to this point where, it's this normal thing of I thought I deserved more. I'm at 125 in the world. I worked really hard to get there. And then I find myself, I lost in the semis of a challenger. And I'm like, I'm just at a same place that I was, 8 months ago when I was 210 in the world. So, you look at that and you're like, how much harder do I have to work? How much more do I have to push it? And for me, I like to say that I'm thoughtful, but it hinders me in so many ways. And my brain starts going, I'm like, what is this all for? I really do enjoy tennis, but the system just keeps beating you down. It just doesn't give you enough. And, me pocketing $35,000, $40,000 at the end of the year, for being 120 in, the world of what I do, I felt embarrassed by that. I was like, you can make jokes and, I'm, a cynic joke maker, but it hurt in the end. So that's kind of where Behind the Racket led into. And I was like, I can't be the only person feeling this. And once obviously I got my close friends involved, where I basically said, I don't know what I'm doing. I'm going to interview you and then we're going to see what happens. But even after the first couple of interviews, like with Ernesto Escobedo and Chris Eubanks and some of these others, like, I had no followers, but they were still getting 50, 100 messages. And I was like, how is this getting out there? How are people really getting involved? And, from there, with some media publicity and getting some more noteworthy, quote unquote, players, it really did start expanding. And then it allowed me to kind of do what I wanted with it, was just share these player stories on and off the court.
Yeah, and I find it so great too to just even pop on the Instagram page because I'll see the recognizable tennis players and faces, and they're often the names that I'm familiar with. Robin Haase, Manny Manella, players like this, and their names just like I haven't thought of that player in quite a while, and you don't realize what's really going on with them behind the scenes, which is obviously and behind the racket, of course, which you capture so well. I'm sure you've closely followed this and have an opinion on it. We have the Miami Open on the go right now, and Canadian Vasek Pospisil actually he lost in the first round there, and during his match, he had a bit of a blow up on the court. He was telling the chair umpire that he was being dealt with getting screamed at by the ATP chairman for an hour and a half the day before for trying to unite the players. And obviously, Vasek Pospisil is one of the key members of and driving members of the PTPA. How important do you think it is for players to have an association or a union? Do you think the PTPA is the right route to go? And why do you think maybe he was feeling that pressure from the ATP chairman just the other day before he had to step on court?
Yeah, it's difficult. I mean, I speak to people outside of the tennis world and they say the people that employ you are the ones that protect you. There's a conflict of interest there, that just can't happen. That doesn't really happen. There's a reason why there's a teachers union. There's a reason why this stuff is here. And obviously we can't use the word union, but we need something to protect us, to give us some power, to give us a seat at the table somehow. And I think that's what the PTPA is aiming to do. Obviously, it's a tremendous undertaking, and I think people have to be a little bit more lenient on the timing. It gets so difficult, connecting all these players that have been so selfish for so many years. I mean, tennis is such a selfish sport. Now you're asking them to join forces, and it's not easy by any means. And from the ATP point of view, they've I can't speak to the WTA as much. I've been in talks with them, but from the ATP, they throw out the word all the time of, just play tennis, the saying, just play tennis, that's all you have to do. And, that's such a cop out to say, hey, you guys are uneducated. You don't need to be in these in these talks, and you don't need this seat at the table. Why would you have that power? So, I did during the pandemic, I was in, conversations with many ATP execs and speaking to them and other people in the world and just seeing how I could possibly make a difference. The PTPA wasn't really an idea, well, that I knew of at that point. And being in those talks, and this was kind of before I came up with the idea of the BTR tour. I was thinking, can I help from the inside out? And after a while, I saw it as kind of a lost cause. I mean, what Vashik and Novak are doing is remarkable, and I think they had probably more resources than I would have during a situation like this. And being in talks, I told Vashik, I was like, you know, the blow up or whatever we want to call it, it would have been 100 times worse if I was in that situation. I mean, it's basically knocking your head against the wall and feeling like you're hitting a brick wall over and over again, and that's what it feels like going up against the ATP, where these people have a feeling in their head that everything's okay, that there's no need for evolution, and everything is just going to go on its way. While have somebody like Vashik that's working extremely hard to enable positive change, and they're just calling him ignorant, for whatever. And it's just like, that's unbelievable. Do that in your private time. First of all, why would you do that in front of 150 other players? So it's embarrassing. And again, the blow up that he had on court, I would have been flipping over chairs. I mean, this is what I dealt with during the pandemic, and I gave up. I mean, good on him for keep going. I gave up and said, I'm going to try from the outside. I'm going to have the BTR tour. I'm going to try to enable change where I don't have to have the ear of the ATP tour. But for Vashik, I mean, he has to be in touch with them all the time. So it's remarkable, but at the same time, I wouldn't put that on anybody because it's a nightmare. I've done it for a few months, and it's not something you want to be up against.
Yeah, I can only imagine, and it's something I know Vashik has been incredibly passionate about for a long time now. It's not just something that they sort of quickly, scramble together, which I think sometimes is maybe people's perspective that they just like quickly cobble together this idea of a PTPA and they're disorganized and don't have a plan. I don't believe that's the case whatsoever. I'm sure they do have a thoughtful plan, and it might be many years before we see any change exacted, but we are hopeful. You mentioned your BTR tour, which I'm curious to know more about, because Behind the Racquet is launching its own tour, so to speak, and I know you have an event in Las Vegas. What makes, I suppose, your tour a little different than a regular touring event, and what can you expect, I guess, if you go to a tournament like this?
Yeah, so it's kind of during the pandemic again. Once I put the ATP aside and WTA aside, I went back to my team, and with a few other people close to me, I said, "Hey, is this possible?" I worked with my co-founder on it and said, I basically wrote down 40 things that I wanted to change within tennis, that I saw needed for the evolution of it. Some things that the pandemic highlighted and was clear to a lot of people. Other things may not be as clear, but I knew were in my head were musts to gain a following, to gain excitement. And it really comes down to fan engagement and accessibility, between how long tennis matches are, between the scheduling of tennis matches, between how long tournaments are, between fan engagement, between the actual cheering during a match, and the scoring format, and then bringing in live music and art and culture. For me, it's bringing kind of a festival feel to the highest level of tennis. And I don't know how big of a baseball fan you are, no offense to baseball players, but I love playing it. Watching it, I get a little bored after a while, I'll be honest. And for me, I enjoy going because you're going to be with friends. You could talk, you can have a beer, have a hot dog, you really enjoy yourself. And I think tennis is far more exciting of a sport in person. But even to that extent, there's no reason why, and things going on around it to really offset it and to have a full day, that wouldn't bring some excitement. And now there's also no reason why we can't play in front of fans cheering at the top of their lungs. I mean, I've done it with kids in practice. I did it in college, where you have these people screaming, and it just motivates me to play better tennis. So for us, I looked at all the revenue streams, and I just saw that the accessibility issues were, not leading to these revenue streams. We needed more, and that's, we got an email during the pandemic from the ATP that basically said we were relying too heavily on fans and seats. These are conversations that the sport should have had 20 years ago, but we're having them now. So for me, I kind of took that as this is time to change, and the BTR tour will be changing that. So, we're excited to kind of launch this. We're excited to change the culture because we will be doing juniors as well. But we think this is the perfect timing for it. And yeah, and we're excited to kind of put this up.
Awesome. And that's starting up first event September in Vegas. So if you're in the area, definitely check it out. Noah, we're gonna wrap with something we do with some of our guests, which are
Okay.
rapid fire questions,
Oh
which are
God,
always
I'm the
fun.
worst at this.
Put you on the spot. We'll see how it goes. First one, pretty easy. Are you a morning or night person?
Night.
Night. Um, favorite movie you can go back and watch at any time, or or
Fa-
one of your favorites.
Ooh, The Hurt Locker.
Good film. Favorite tournament to play?
Indian Wells.
Toughest opponent you have ever faced?
Federer.
The biggest win of your career?
John Isner.
Do you have a favorite country or place you have visited?
Ooh, I think Paris is always top of my list, but Australia is second.
If you could meet any one athlete in the world, who would it be and why?
Wow. Meet any one athlete. I think Michael Jordan's up there. Lewis Hamilton as well.
Hmm.
Yeah, those would be top two. I'm sure I'm missing a few others, and yeah, throw Messi in there. Why not?
Nice.
Yeah.
And last one for you. If you weren't a professional tennis player, what do you think you would be?
Take out sports as a whole because I think soccer would be second on that
Okay.
list. Yeah, I mean photography and journalism. So like photojournalism would kind of be the path that I was always in. I think that kind of led to Behind the Racket in a way. So
Awesome. Well,
yes.
Noah, thanks so much for joining us on Matchpoint Canada. And if we want to find your work behind the racket, you guys have a website, great podcast, and we're looking forward to seeing the tour come as well in September.
Yes, thank you so much for having me.